Well, one page says I'm live, and the other page says loading preview. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started and see where we are. I think you know where you are and how it works. And tonight, it's pretty much all on you. I'm going to start with the comments that have come in over the past week or so, and just go through them until we start getting some feedback in the live chat. And then I'll go to the live chat and start answering your questions in the live chat. I want it to be primarily an interaction in the live chat. Ask your questions, make your comments in the live chat. Until the live chat starts rolling, I'll go through the comments that have come in over the past little while. And this preview player is not loading, so I'm going, okay, it says I'm live. Let me go to live dash, okay, there we go. All right, I think everything looks like it's going okay, except I still don't have a preview window. It says I have an excellent connection, and I see you all are watching, but I still don't have a preview window so I can see I can see what's streaming. So I don't know if you can just hear me, or if you can see me, or if it's working at all. Jump in the live chat, let me know you're here and what you are seeing and hearing, if anything. And I'm going to get started with the comments. I think part of the problem is I am using now I don't know how to get out of this. I'm using this, it's a new studio window on YouTube. They keep changing the features and updating different features, and it's a little hard to keep up with sometimes. So let me see if I can refresh it and see how it's going. But I'm not, okay, all right, okay, there. Now everything looks like it's working okay. All right, jump in the live chat, let me know you're here, and we will have a good discussion this evening, I think. I've got some good comments. This comment, you know, sometimes these comments come in, it's the latest comment, it was made just earlier today, but it was made on a video that was posted probably about 11 years ago. And it catches me sometimes, you know, when these comments get posted on videos that have been on here for a long time, at how long I've been using YouTube. You know, I think my oldest video on here is about 12 years old. And if you go back 12 years in YouTube history, that's the early days of YouTube, even before Google bought YouTube. You know, after Google bought YouTube, a lot of things started changing, and they just dumped a lot of money into YouTube. And I've been posting videos on YouTube since YouTube was a pretty new service. And that's interesting to see that sometimes. But this comment got posted on a pretty old video. And it says, well, let me say the video that it's posted to, because then the comment will make sense, I think. The SDA, that Seventh-day Adventist Church, is not the true church. That's the title of the video. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is not the true church. And that comes from when I was doing the live TV program in Danville, Virginia. Well, the program was broadcast from a studio in Eden, North Carolina. But I was living in Danville, Virginia, and preaching in Danville, Virginia at the time. And that was a subject that came up. I think it was a live caller called into the program and made a comment about the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so I said, no, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not the true New Testament church, and here's why, and gave some reasons. Well, somebody posted on there a comment that said, nowhere in the Bible does it say that God changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. Well, you're right. There's nowhere in the Bible it says that. Nowhere in the Bible does it say God changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, because if God changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, then He would have had to have changed the week to make Sunday the last day of the week, not the first day of the week, because the Sabbath was on the last day of the week. Right? It says in Genesis, God created the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested. In Exodus chapter 20 rather, Moses bases the Sabbath day law on the creation week and says, for in 6 days God created the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day He rested. And so the Sabbath day law was part of the law of Moses. You can't change the Sabbath to a different day of the week, because the Sabbath is Saturday. It's always been Saturday, always going to be Saturday. But that doesn't have anything to do with New Testament worship. See, I'm not under the law of Moses. As an Old Testament Hebrew, the Sabbath day law wasn't even binding on Gentiles. It was only binding on the children of Israel. It was part of the law of Moses. Nowhere, just like this person says that, nowhere does it say God changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. Well, likewise, nowhere does it say that anybody observed the Sabbath before it was given as part of the law of Moses. You don't read about Abraham keeping the Sabbath day, and you don't read about Melchizedek. There's just very little there about Melchizedek. He didn't observe the Sabbath. You don't read Lot or Job, or you got the whole book of Job, where Job is being accused by his friends of sinning against God. And they keep telling Job, the reason you're going through these horrible trials and this terrible suffering is because you have sinned against God. And Job, all the way through Job keeps maintaining the fact that he hasn't transgressed. He hasn't. He's not this gross, reprobate, depraved sinner that his friends keep accusing him of being. And in doing that, he goes through the things. And really, Job is about the closest thing we have to a written law of patriarchy. I think that's one of the purposes of Job, is to show how the patriarchs, Gentiles in other words, that weren't the Hebrew people, the descendants of Abraham, to show how they served God. And Job goes, through all these different things. I've helped the poor, I've done all these things, I've shown mercy and been a good person, served God. And he never says anything about keeping the Sabbath. Never says anything about, I've kept the Sabbath holy. He never says that. Well, that's because the Sabbath day law wasn't binding on Job. He was a Gentile. He wasn't a Jew. He lived probably about the time of Abraham. And so, nowhere does it say that anybody other than the Hebrews kept the Sabbath day law. And so when Christ fulfilled the law of Moses and brought in the new covenant, as the Hebrews book emphasizes over and over and over again, that today Christians, from the time of Pentecost and Acts chapter 2, people have been accountable to God under the law of Christ, not the law of Moses. In Ephesians chapter 2, he broke down the middle wall of separation between Jew and Gentile so that both could be one in the church. In Colossians chapter 2, he nailed the law to the cross. In other words, he fulfilled the law of Moses so that he could establish his new covenant. Romans chapter 7. In making the analogy between a woman whose first husband is dead so that she can be married to another man without being an adulteress, that analogy is the first husband that's dead is the law of Moses, so that the Jews could be under the law of Christ without being spiritual adulterers. So you're right. Nowhere does it say that God changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, because that would contradict the whole idea of Sabbath. But neither did God say anywhere that Christians are supposed to observe the Sabbath. Nowhere. In Hebrews chapter 4, the Hebrews writer points out that the type and shadow of the Sabbath day law in the Old Testament is fulfilled by the ultimate rest of heaven. There's a rest that remains for the children of God. And that's going to be fulfilled in heaven. That ultimate rest that God's faithful people will receive. So, if you want to talk about the Christian Sabbath, which is not a biblical term, which is a man-made term and is the way that a lot of people understand it is absolutely 100% wrong. You never hear me talking about the Christian Sabbath. But if you want to talk about how the Sabbath actually does apply to Christians, it's to look forward to heaven so that we're prepared for that rest that remains, that rest to come for the children of God. So that's what the person had commented. Nowhere does it say that God changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. You're right. Neither did he bind the Sabbath law on Christians either. That's nowhere. You know, Jesus reiterates 9 of the 10 commandments. The only one of the 10 commandments that Jesus didn't reiterate and teach as doctrine for his disciples was that one, the Sabbath day law. Nowhere did Jesus ever teach that his disciples were supposed to keep the Sabbath as the way that the Hebrews did. Nowhere does he teach that. Nowhere in any of the epistles does it tell Christians to keep the Sabbath. Nowhere in Acts do you have that example of the church meeting on the Sabbath for worship. Nowhere, anywhere in the New Testament do you see the New Testament church assembling on Saturday for worship. Nowhere. And so Calm, who posts good comments pretty frequently, I appreciate Calm's comments. I should say I appreciate all of your comments, but Calm makes some good comments, and he says, he or she, I don't know, I don't know. Just from the handle, Calm, I don't know if it's he or she, but I'm just going to say he in the generic sense of mankind. He says, it doesn't even say the Hebrews in the Old Testament were to assemble for worship on the seventh day. God didn't tell them to worship as a congregation on that day. He told them to rest. And that's a point a lot of people miss, especially the Seventh-day Adventists, where they look at Saturday as a day of worship. Nowhere in the Old Testament, in the law of Moses, does it ever say that the Sabbath day was to be a day of worship. It never says that. It says it was to be a day of rest. They were to do no work on that day. Doesn't say they were supposed to worship that day. The synagogue system that developed much later, and their habit of assembling at the synagogues on the Sabbath day was because they weren't allowed to do any work. So on that day, they would assemble at the synagogues for the reading of the Scriptures and for prayer, and they would spend that day in devotion to God. But that wasn't a commanded day of worship for them, not like Sunday is for the church, not like the first day of the week is for the church in the New Testament. And we'll get to that. There's another comment regarding that we'll get to in a little while. So, again, Calm makes a very good comment. That's absolutely true. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it tell the children of Israel to worship on the Sabbath day. They had their feast days where they were commanded to appear before God, wherever the tabernacle was, and then later where the temple was in Jerusalem. And they were to make their different offerings there and bring their different offerings to the priests there. But it doesn't say anywhere that the Sabbath day was to be their day of worship. Nowhere. Okay? So that's a good comment. Hello, Serena. Good to see you watching. I'm glad that you see and hear me. I wasn't sure the way that this thing was working. Like I said, YouTube updates their features all the time, and a lot of times they put on these updated features without any real clear instructions for how to use them, and it's just kind of hit or miss sometimes. So I'm glad it's working okay. I like the new layout of the behind the scenes live studio page. It looks nice. It gives me a lot of good information. It just didn't seem like it was working right off the bat. So I'm glad that you see and hear me. Hello, Gwendolyn. Good to see you watching this evening. All right, let's go to the next comment. And I'm just going in order from the most recent, and I'll just keep going until we're done and keep checking the live chat to see what all's there in the live chat. And there's 19 Coco Liso. Good to see you watching this evening. Al. And Al says, hello, everyone. Norm, why do you believe the second commandment is against images? Isn't that part of the first, which condemns idolatry? Well, Al, that's a good point you bring up, because let me just go to Exodus chapter 20, the Ten Commandments, and also in Deuteronomy. We can look at the giving of the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy also, and that may even make it a little clearer. But in Exodus chapter 20, as you go through the Ten Commandments, you've got verse 2, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. Number 2, you shall not make for yourselves a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. Okay? Verse 7, next commandment. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Verse 8, next commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your sons, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Next commandment, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother. Are you keeping count? All right. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the earth, long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Verse 13, next commandment, you shall not murder. Verse 14, next commandment, you shall not commit adultery. Verse 15, next commandment, you shall not steal. All right, verse 16, next commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Verse 17, next commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. All right, so how many is that, Al? How many commandments was that? Okay. Verse 3 through 6, that's 1. Verse 7, that's 2. Verse 8 through 11, that's 3. Verse 12, that's 4. Verse 13 is 5. Verse 14 is 6. Verse 15 is 7. Verse 16 is 8. Verse 17 is 9. Did I miscount that? I thought it was supposed to be 10 commandments, Al. I thought it was supposed to be 10 commandments. But let's see. If 3 and 4, which is what you said, right? Norm, why do you believe the second commandment is against images? Isn't that part of the first, which condemns idolatry? So 3 and 4 then, if that's one commandment, then it's 9 commandments, not 10. Right? But the first commandment, you have no gods before me, that's 1. Verse 4 through 6, 2. Verse 7, 3. Verse 8 through 11, 4. Verse 12, 5. Verse 13, 6. Verse 14, 7. Verse 25, or verse 15 rather, 8. Verse 16, 9. Verse 17, 10. Right? Because there's 10 commandments, isn't that right? Okay. So, but I'm sure the point you're getting to is that the commandment actually isn't against graven images, which the Catholic Church is covered up with graven images, everything from the rosary to the statues of the saints, to the statues of Mary, to the statue, all these, to the crucifix, all these, I'm in our auditorium now. There's no cross in here. We have no graven images, right? Because it's not God's will. Nowhere did God say to have those things. And He explicitly told the Jews to not have them. And so, even if you did take verses 3 and 4 as one command, how does that change the fact that it says not to have any images? Even if you do take it, 3 and 4, as one command, it still says, don't have any images. Nothing, no images of anything on heaven or on earth. So, the Jews, or the Hebrews, I should say the Hebrews, they weren't called Jews until they came back from the captivity. So the Hebrews, the children of Israel, were not allowed, they were not supposed to have any kind of representations that, as the Catholic Church says, is just an aid for your prayers, to help you focus your prayers. You can focus on this thing and it helps you to, focus your prayers or however, it's something like that. I may not be saying exactly the same way that you would say it, but it's close. They were explicitly told not to. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have your attention on heaven. You're supposed to have your attention on God. Right? They had the Ark of the Covenant with the presence of God. He didn't tell them to go pray to the Ark of the Covenant. About the closest thing you come to that is that when they were away from Jerusalem, that they were supposed to pray toward Jerusalem. Jeremiah explicitly rebukes them for viewing the temple and the Ark of the Covenant, the altar, and Jesus rebuked them for viewing the altar and the temple in kind of an idolatrous way and looking at those things as the objects of their devotion. They were explicitly rebuked for that. Jeremiah said, the temple of Jerusalem, the temple of Jerusalem, the temple of Jerusalem are these. Rebuking the people for that idea that as long as that temple was there, as long as that physical structure was there, then nothing could happen to them. And that was not right. See, they developed this materialistic view which was not right. And so even if you do combine those two, which then you got the problem of saying, okay, where's 10 commandments? Because now you got 9. But even if you did that, it doesn't change the fact that it condemns physical representations of spiritual things. It condemns that. We're not supposed to do that. And I think that's where you were getting with that. But your combination there doesn't work for 10 commandments. Then you would have to, start talking about the 9 commandments, not the 10. All right, Richard Briggs says, Norm, prom is a big debate at my house, and with some brothers I talk to, we are divided on this point. I am against due to Galatians 5:16-21, and the word lasciviousness, and other passages I use for my point. Richard, I am with you 100%. It bothers me so bad that Christians will send their children to an event that is just steeped in worldliness. Now, I know that there are good alternative events to that. And you know, I think even we have to even be careful about just, you know, making a blanket statement to say, you know, dancing is wrong. Well, you know, there's a lot of dancing that is ceremonial or cultural or is not lascivious. It's not a wanton display of sexuality and flaunting, and it's not those things. And so, you know, it's not that I you know, have the view that any kind of dancing is wrong, but the kind of dancing and the kind of mingling, the kind of activities that go on at most high school proms, absolutely something that Christians should stay away from. Absolutely. You know, look at the things that surrounds the idea of prom. Every year, I know here, everywhere I've lived in a lot of different places. About the only place I didn't see it was when I was living in India. But everywhere I've lived, when it comes to prom time, there's a big push against drinking and driving, about, quote, safe sex, about, you know, all these things, you know, because it's known and to a large degree expected and accepted. And that's the real problem is how the world just accepts these things of immorality and says, well, you know, you can't really do anything about it. They're going to do it anyway, so let's help them do it in a safe way. That's why parents, they don't deserve that term of being called parents. We need a different term for what to call them. I don't even know, you know, we'll have drinking parties for their underage children with this twisted idea that they would rather them drink they're going to drink anyway, so let's let them drink at home where they're safe. That's just, to me, that's insane. No, how about we teach them openly and honestly and not use these, you know, kids are pretty good at being able to detect hyperbole. I think that's a safe way to put it, hyperbole. And when we use hyperbolic arguments with our kids to try to explain to them why they shouldn't drink, why they shouldn't have premarital sex, why they shouldn't be, you know, engaging with the opposite sex in ways that are going to lead to teen pregnancy and things like that, why they should dress modestly, things like that. You know, sometimes because we want to make the point, because we want them to really, you know, for it to really stick, we get really hyperbolic about it. You know, oh, if you drink a beer, then, you know, you could end up taken into slavery somewhere, sold in Dubai or something, you know, something crazy like that. Which, you know, it happens. That's true. But it's pretty far-fetched, right? We need to teach our kids to be careful. But we can teach them against these things without, you know, going off the wall radical with our arguments. Show them what the Bible says, like you said, about lasciviousness and about the works of the flesh. And be open and honest with what these things lead to. When you dress immodestly, you flaunt yourself, you draw attention to your flesh, and that goes for girls and boys. These are the things it leads to. Look at the problems associated with teen pregnancy. That's one of the biggest indicators of poverty. One of the biggest indicators that you are going to be in poverty your whole life is having children outside of marriage. It's the statistics are through the roof. Now it's not universal, obviously. There are people who are single parents that are very successful and raise their children successfully. That's not to say that's a universal principle, but it is a statistical probability of great likelihood that engaging in activities that lead to illegitimate births, that is a major indicator of poverty. You are most likely, statistically speaking, you are most likely going to live a life of dependency. Your children are going to live a life of dependency. You're going to live a life of poverty. It's going to be very hard for you to get ahead. It's going to be very hard for you to reach the levels of success that are possible. Where on the other hand, statistically speaking, people who wait till marriage to engage in sexual activity and to start having children are much more likely to be well-balanced, successful people. Parents and children both. So that's one of the things that we need to talk about with our kids. And I think sometimes we try to wear our rose-colored glasses and think, oh, well, that's, I don't have to worry about things like that. Oh, yeah, you do. One of the best arguments against prom that I can think of are these things like I'm talking about, the things associated with prom. And ask yourself, can a Christian be involved with something that has these kinds of things associated with it? The number one occasion where girls decide to lose their virginity. Have you ever heard the saying? And I'm not trying to be vulgar. I'm just being straight. And I'm straight like this when I talk to people about prom. I'm just being straight with you. I'm not trying to be vulgar. I'm not trying to be crude. I'm just being straight. You ever heard the saying, as nervous as a virgin on prom night? There's a reason for that saying, because that is the number one occasion, even more than marriage. It's sad that more girls don't have that commitment to keep themselves pure for marriage, but even more than marriage, prom is the event where the majority of girls make the decision to lose their virginity. So that's where that saying comes from, nervous as a virgin on prom night. Like I said about the DUI statistics and the drunk driving and the fatal wrecks on prom nights. Every year on prom night, I don't know the exact numbers because I wasn't expecting the question, I didn't look it up, but it's a lot of teenagers either are seriously injure other people, or die in drunk driving accidents because that's something that is associated with prom. Drinking, they go to hotels, they go to prom, stay at prom for a little while, and then they go to drinking parties at hotels, or at somebody's house. Maybe somebody who's got people who don't deserve the title of parents that is hosting a drinking party for the children. How could I send my child to an event like that? There's no way. There's no way. And I don't care how much. I'll give you a personal example just to illustrate my level of commitment on this. We had a foreign exchange student staying with us. obviously high school student, and I told her when she came that I don't agree with the school dances, the way that they're conducted, the things that go on at them. I don't agree with it. You're old enough to, she was 17. You're old enough to make your own decisions. I'm not your parents, but you are living with me, and I'm not going to try to stop you from going. I'll talk to you about why I don't think you should go, but I'm not going to try to stop you from going to these school events and things that you want to take part in. I'm not going to try to stop you, but do not ask me to take you to them or to pick you up from them or to be involved with them in any way. And when you, if you decide to go to them, I don't want to hear anything about it. I don't want to discuss it. And don't ask me to be involved in it. First time it came up, she came to me and asked me to take her to the school dance, and I said absolutely not. And it was a big ordeal, but I was not going to take her. And I've never taken anybody to any school dance, and I won't. And I don't care how mad they get at me or how crazy they think I am for not. I'm not doing it, because that would make me a hypocrite. Because I know the things associated with it. I know the things that go on, the kind of dancing that they do. You know, you watch some of these videos on, and I'm not, please don't misunderstand me. I am not at all suggesting that any of you go and search prom night on YouTube and watch some of the dances, but I've seen some of them, and I mean, some of the ones I've seen are worse than what it looks like in nightclubs. You know, I mean, the nightclubs are pretty bad, but some of these YouTube videos I've seen of prom dances, they make the nightclubs look tame. There's no way that a Christian could justify being involved in something like that. No way. And like I said, a lot of times there's good alternative things that different people will host, alternative activities for people who don't want to go to prom and don't want to be involved in that kind of activities, and those are good. So I would suggest that you maybe try to point them to those kind of activities, or you do something. You know, when prom comes up, say, hey, let's go to Disney World or whatever. Do something with your family. Take them somewhere else so that prom is not an issue, right? It can be done. All right. Richard goes on to say, but if I'm wrong, then my daughter misses out something important to her. She tells everyone I'm strict and she hates me and my views and my stand on it. And that's a problem. That's, there is such a thing as teenage mental illness. Teenagers do not know what's best for them. And they're coming to an age where they're wanting more independence, they're wanting to make more decisions for themselves, and we should let them. But at the same time, they're still young enough, and they're at a time when their hormones are going just out of control, and we do need to, give some very strong guidance, while at the same time, and it's a difficult balance. Man, I'm telling you, it's a difficult balance. To balance those two things of letting a teenager that is coming to an age where they should be making their own decisions, and they should be, thinking in a more mature, more responsible way, but at the same time, they're experiencing this teenage mental illness where they will do just any stupid thing that comes up. It blows my mind, some of these viral challenges that come up on social media. And these kids are doing stuff that that leave them with permanent scars, or they die because these social media challenges, they're not able to think about things as rationally as they should, especially in this social media age. With, if you thought peer pressure was bad when we were teenagers, man, it's nothing compared to the peer pressure now. And so the guidance needs to be even stronger, I think, because they're faced with a lot more peer pressure, I guess would be the best way to put it now, than we were, I think, anyway, in my opinion. And so it is a hard balance. But if we're going to be the biblical parents we're supposed to be and recognize that the Bible doesn't tell me anywhere, I can't read anywhere in the Bible where it says that I'm supposed to be my child's best friend. And I think that's one of the big problems with modern psychology, child psychology, parenting, the way psychology teaches parenting today. And people have this idea that they're supposed to be their child's best friend, and they don't want to do anything that's going to, make them mad or upset. That's why we got a bunch of young people running around now. They're getting out of college, going into the workforce, and they don't know how to function because they've never been told no. They've never been told that their work is below par. Teachers can't grade their papers in red because, red ink might hurt their feelings. And now they're coming out of college and going into the workforce, and the boss tells them to do something, and they do it. They don't do it the way the boss tells them to do it. They do it the way they want to do it. And then when the boss tells them this isn't good enough, go back and do it again. Do it the way I told you to. They have a meltdown. They can't function. The Bible doesn't tell me I'm supposed to be my child's friend. Now, I want to have a good relationship with my child. It does say, don't provoke them to wrath. Bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord, Ephesians chapter 6 or 5. It says I'm supposed to be kind and loving and be a good example and a guidance. And, it tells me all those things I'm supposed to be as a parent. But it also says I'm supposed to discipline them. And if necessary, discipline them harshly. Because they need that kind of guidance. We can't just turn kids loose and expect them to do the right thing. They're not going to do the right thing. They're going to do whatever stupid thing their friends dare them to do. And so we need to be careful about that. So yeah, I know prom is a big deal. It's but that's that's the way I would approach it. Look at the things that are associated with prom. Is this the kind of person you want to be and the kind of people you want to associate with? You think you're going to go in there and you're going to be a positive influence on them, and that's not how it works. You don't send a young, impressionable person into the den of iniquity to try to be a good influence in that situation. That's not what you do. You want to put somebody in there to be a good influence, put some grown-ups in there that have been through that and been there, done that, and know how stupid it is, and can give some good guidance about why not to do that. And so, no, don't let them go to prom. And I know it's tough. They get mad, they pitch a fit, but they'll get over it. Al says they were not supposed to have images and worship them. I don't worship any images. Also, Deuteronomy 5:21 is second commandment. We don't group one's wife with one's property. Remember, chapter and verse numbers came 1,200 years. Right, so that's how you get back to 10. About you break the law of covetousness, to where he says, don't covet your neighbor's property, don't covet your neighbor's wife. You break that apart into two commandments, but they're both the same command. Don't covet, right? So you're taking the command not to covet and to get back to 10 because you take out the images because you got images. So you take out the command about images, and to get it back to 10 instead of 9, you break apart the command not to covet. The Catholic Church is the only ones that do that. The only ones that do that. And gee, I wonder why. So, there's that. Sebastian, TV is more immoral than a dance. That's right. That's why I don't have TV. Al, I have 3 young daughters. Well, let me go back to that, Sebastian, because I wouldn't agree with that. There are immoral things on TV. TV is filled with immorality. I haven't been a cable or satellite subscriber for, man, I don't know. Well, I'm just estimating around 05 is when I cut everything. Around 05, 2005. And so this is 2019, so 10, 14 years. At least, maybe longer than that. I haven't been a cable subscriber or satellite subscriber. I'll if I want to watch something, a movie or TV show or whatever, I'll get it online and watch stuff. I'm not saying I don't watch any TV shows or anything. It's just I don't have it being piped into my house where anybody can just turn on the TV and flip through the channels and watch any kind of, gross, disgusting immorality being pumped right into my house. I don't have that and haven't for a long time. I watch my TV, I guess you might say, a la carte, right? But back to your statement, I still wouldn't say that TV is more immoral than a dance, because one is something that you're observing. Right? And you may be, and that would be wrong to be watching and taking enjoyment in something that is immoral, but it's not something that you are actively participating in, right? Again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying it's okay to watch programs that are glorifying immorality. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's not the same thing as actually taking part in an immoral activity, like going to, and again, I don't want to just say like going to a dance, because not all dances are equal. And I think one of the mistakes we make when we talk about stuff like this, and maybe we should be more careful, is to not just make blanket statements, because we make a statement like that, we say dancing is wrong. And your children hear that and they think, well, what about this ceremonial Indian dance, or this cultural Russian dance, or this country line stepping dance, or they look at that and they say, well, now he said dancing is wrong, but look at that. I mean, what's wrong with that? Or you say dancing is wrong, but then you're watching gymnastics, and I mean, I don't know what's next for gymnastics, or track and field. I've got to where I don't even watch track and field anymore, because I don't know what the next step's going to be, to just go back to Roman days and have them compete naked. I don't know. But you tell your kids dancing is wrong, and then you watch the sporting events. It's not so much baseball, football, things like that, but track and field, and the gymnasts and the runners and the stuff they're wearing, and and they think, well, now look, he said dancing is wrong, but now here we are at this track and field event, and they're out there running around almost naked. So kids see stuff like that, and you don't think they put 2 and 2 together. They do, and what that gets in their head is that my dad is unbalanced. He's biased. He's maybe even hypocritical, and that's certainly not the impression we want to give to our children. We need to be balanced. So I think we need to be more careful about just making blanket statements, right? uh, and take the time, put in the work, because it's important to actually explain things. So again, watching something on TV that is glorifying immorality, yeah, that's bad, but it's not as bad, or it's not the same kind of bad. Like you said, TV is more immoral than a dance. And I would say no, because, actually going to a dance like prom, I'm going to qualify it and say a dance like prom or nightclub dancing, that kind of dancing and mingling, and the whole purpose of it. I've read in studying, the psychology of dance and things like that. I've read quotes from professional dance instructors that have admitted that a lot of the dancing that people engage in is a form of foreplay. And there's no question. That is a fact. It is a form of foreplay. Well, what comes after foreplay? A pregnant teenage daughter. That's what comes after it. And so, no, don't. That's not the same thing. You're talking about watching something, which is, again, that's bad. And that's part of the problem, I think, is, our teenagers are watching WB, not mine, or C. It used to be WB, not CW. And CW, that channel's dedication, I think, is to influence teenagers. It's all of their programming is targeted at teenagers, and it's all about just having parties and having sex. And so we let our teenagers watch stuff like that. Then they want to go to, they see these beautiful proms on their TV programs, and these, the glorification of these things, and it is, I understand it's a big event, it's a milestone in the high school experience. Well, some experiences should not be had, and so they watch that and they want to go partake in it, participate in it. But watching it is not the same thing as participating in it, right? So I think that would be where I might slightly disagree with you. I get the point of your statement, but maybe a slight disagreement. Al says, I have 3 young daughters, and I'm already nervous about having to deal with these things. Al, homeschool. Odds are, if you homeschool and you're part of a homeschool group, the homeschool group will have a senior party, or whatever it is, that is a great alternative to the kind of gross immoral proms that a lot of public school systems have. All right. I'm a big proponent of homeschooling. My daughter has never been in a public school. Sebastian, I tossed my TVs a year ago because even the advertisements are R-rated. You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things about watching streaming content. You only watch what you choose to watch. It's not just channel surfing. You pick something and say, okay, I'm going to watch this. And depending on the service, I guess, it's commercial free. So you don't even have to watch the commercials. So, but I agree. I agree with you 100%. I just made a comment about that. Well, I comment on that somewhat frequently, maybe more frequently than I should. That the modern media is horrible. And last week, 2 mass shootings, 2. And how many have there been in recent years? Just one after another after another. I was riding around, it hadn't been all that long ago, and the flags are at half staff. And I started thinking, I see the flags at half staff more frequently than I see them flying high. And it's because of all of these tragedies that are happening way too frequently. And it's not guns. It's not because people have guns. People have always had guns in this country. There's never been a time in this country's history, even when it was British colonies, there's never been a time in this country's history that people haven't had guns. So what's the difference now? It's people being filled with hatred and being corrupted by modern media. And it's horrible. Not only do you see the glorification of just gross violence, but these kids have been taught that they're just an accident of nature. They're not a special creation. They're just an accident of nature. That it should be perfectly legal for their mother to kill them before they're born. Now they're even saying that, even if you were born and your mother decided she didn't want you when you were born, that the doctor can just let you die. You teach kids stuff like that long enough, that they're just a hairless ape, and, we can kill you before you're born. If you live, too long, we kill you when you get old, because human life is meaningless. Well, then eventually they're going to start acting like human life is meaningless, and they're going to want to, transition from these first-person shooter video games to actually going out and doing it. And so, media is a big problem. The condition of media today is a big problem. You're absolutely right. Let's see. Sebastian, porn is something you observe. Is that better than dancing with someone? Well, like I said, the dancing is an actual activity, and depending on the kind of dancing, it's a precursor to actually engaging in sexual activity. Porn is bad. Porn is awful. The levels of porn addiction are staggering, and it's it especially bothers me because I have a teenage daughter that is going to be dating before very long. I'm sure pretty soon she's going to come asking me about wanting to go out with some guy, and it's terrifying to me because odds are the young man that she's going to want to go out with at some point has been exposed to hardcore pornography. And it will have corrupted the way that he views my daughter. And it's a big problem. It's a big problem. It goes back to what Paul said in 1 Timothy, that money is the root of all kinds of evil. Because why is it that the government can regulate all these different things, but they won't do anything about pornography? I've actually gone to local district's attorney, the district attorney where I was living, gone to them and reported a store that was selling hardcore pornography that was illegal in the state I was living in, according to that state's obscenity laws, was illegal, was against the law to sell in that state. And the district attorney looked at me and basically said, what do you want me to do about it? Well, I want you to enforce the law. What if my teenage son got caught buying alcohol underage? What would you do to the store? If you found out that store was selling alcohol to teenagers, what would you do to them? You'd shut them down. Well, here you got a store that is selling illegal pornography, which it should all be illegal. But you got the store selling illegal pornography, and the district attorney just shrugs and says, what do you want me to do about it? Oh, well, I want you to shut them down. Put them out of business. The sheriff went over there and told him, put it somewhere where it's not so visible. No, it's illegal. The sheriff's supposed to be enforcing the law. Go in there and take it out and throw it in a pile and burn it and tell them if you put any more back in here, we're going to close you. That's the law. But no, they say, just put it somewhere where it's not so visible. See, that's the problem is money. It's $1 billion a year industry, and if you think that some of that billions, same way with alcohol and tobacco and a lot of other stuff, that's why the marijuana legalization is such a big deal, because a lot of people are making a lot more money off of it being illegal than they would if it was legalized. So money is the root of all kinds of evil. That's why media companies, major media companies, have made it a point to be the gateway drug, if you will, to hardcore pornography. You watch some of these programs, they make references to hardcore pornography, they feature porn stars on their TV shows, they do all these things where it's a gateway, just like they say marijuana is a gateway drug to, or alcohol is a gateway drug to harder drugs. And a lot of these sitcoms that people are watching and a lot of these TV programs that people watch are gateway drugs to get them into the hardcore pornography, which is extremely addictive. It does something in your brain that creates an addiction. And it's terrifying. It is, really, if we had the government that was functioning the way that it's supposed to, then things like that would not be legal. How can, and they say it's freedom of speech. No, it's not freedom. That's people engaging in an activity. It's not speech. It's prostitution. Prostitution's illegal. But that's legal because you say it's free speech? No, it's legal because you want the money. Right? But I'm ranting. I'll move on. All right. But there again, Sebastian, yes, it is really bad. I'm not trying to take away from the fact that it's really bad, but it's still not actually engaging in the activity. I'll give you an example. The Bible says that the only exception for divorce, in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 9, Jesus said that the only reason to get a divorce is fornication. And I know that the New King James and most of the modern translations kind of use a euphemism there. Instead of saying fornication, they say sexual immorality, which is not a good translation, because all sexual immorality is not fornication, and I think pornography is a good example of that. The Greek word there, in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 9, when Jesus says, "And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for porneia," the Greek word there is porneia, and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. So Jesus said that the only reason you can get a divorce and be free to marry another person. Now you can get a divorce, God hates divorce, but if you just, you have to get a divorce for, whatever reason, you can get a divorce, but you can't get remarried. The only way you can get a divorce and be free to remarry is if you are the innocent party in a divorce that was caused by porneia, right? The Greek word porneia means having sex outside of marriage. Fornicate, that's what fornication means. It means sexual activity outside of marriage, okay? Well, watching pornography is sexually immoral. It is sexual immorality, no question. It is sexual immorality. But it's not porneia. It's not fornication, because you're not actually engaging in a sexual act with someone outside of marriage. Okay? So, pornography is immoral. It is really bad and very hurtful, very damaging to society and to, relationships, culture, everything. It's really, really damaging, but it's not fornication. But a man and a woman are, dancing together. It's foreplay for actual fornication. They engage in fornication, and now adultery has taken place, and that person's spouse can divorce them and put them away. Okay, so they're both immoral, they're both wrong, but one has, actual stipulations, I guess, on divorce and remarriage. So there's a difference in, now most likely somebody who is a purveyor of pornography, they will be more likely, I think, to commit fornication, but that itself is not. It's not, a woman catches her husband watching pornography, she can't divorce him and then marry somebody else. She can divorce him. She can say, I just can't live with him because, he watches pornography. But that's not fornication that then she would be free to go and marry somebody else. But if she caught her husband actually engaged in sexual activity with another person, that is fornication. That is what the Greek word porneia means. And she could divorce him and then marry another person. So, there's just a difference. It may be a slight difference. It may get pretty close to the line, but there's a difference with being an observer of something and being a participant in something. The observer, is being affected, and I don't think that somebody can watch stuff, filled with filthy language and, all this different stuff, and it doesn't affect the way that they think, the way that they talk. That stuff's going to come out, they're going to start talking that way and acting that way, and it's going to influence them. I don't think that cannot be the case. But there is a difference between being an observer and a participant, okay? That's all I'm saying. All right. Terry Thacker, Brother Norm, I watch YouTube on my TV. I'm watching your program right now. I usually watch it later when I can't catch it live. That's great, Terry. And, that's one of the benefits of the smart TVs and like Roku. I've got now I didn't say I threw away my TVs. That's not what I said. I said I don't subscribe to cable or satellite, or I do have a TV and it has a Roku box. I don't know if that's what you're watching or not. It has a Roku box, and on the Roku box, or no, I take that back. It's got an Apple TV connected to it, and on Apple TV you can watch YouTube. You can see your pictures on Facebook and do different stuff. You can rent movies and TV shows and things like that, and that's what I was saying. When I watch something, it's because it's not because I'm channel surfing and just see something pop up on my TV. It's because I pick something that I want to watch. And so that's right, Terry. And I think that's a good thing that you can get a la carte programming like that. I don't think it's going to be very long before traditional network TV is a thing of the past, and everybody's going to be watching a la carte TV. All right, Al, read verse 21, King James. Desire neighbor's wife and covet thy neighbor's goods. Aren't verses 7 and 8 talking about the same thing? You're talking about in Exodus chapter 20, I'm assuming. That's Exodus chapter 20, verses 7 and 8. In Exodus chapter 20, the Ten Commandments, verses 7 and 8, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. How is 7 and 8 talking about the same thing? One's about taking the Lord's name in vain, and the other one is about keeping the Sabbath day. So are you talking about Deuteronomy? Let's see. let me find it in Deuteronomy. It's Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 7 and 8, right? I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. It says, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself a carved image." Well, they're related, but it's not the same thing. I mean, you could worship another god without having an image of it, right? In the New Testament, Paul says covetousness is idolatry. That's not an actual, graven image, is it? That's a desire for something that supersedes your desire for God. That's why it's called idolatry. So, no, I wouldn't say 7 and 8 are the same thing. No, they are both spiritual in nature. As you see in the Ten Commandments, there's commandments that relate to our and I want to be careful how I talk about the Ten Commandments, because I'm a New Testament Christian. I'm not an Old Testament Hebrew. I'm not under the Ten Commandments. I'm under the New Testament of Jesus Christ. But the Ten Commandments relate to the relationship with God and the relationship with one another. Well, Jesus, taught the same things, except for the Sabbath day law. He taught the same things, how we relate to God and how we relate to each other. And so, no, I wouldn't say 7 and 8 are the same thing. Al, can anyone count the thou shalls and shall nots? How many are there? Well, I'm not going to do that right now, Al. That would make for some pretty dull airtime, I think. Sebastian, is lusting adultery, as Jesus said? Well, when Jesus was talking about looking at a woman to lust for her, he's already committed adultery with her in his heart. That's not the same thing as fornication. And the point that Jesus is making there, he's not talking about just looking at a woman and appreciating that she's an attractive woman, and you might be attracted to her. If you're a single guy, then the way that you make your interaction with the opposite sex is that you are attracted to that person. Well, that doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. What Jesus is talking about is when he says you're looking at, he's not just talking about looking at her. He means you're pursuing her. You're pursuing her with lustful intentions. And the principle there is that if the only thing preventing you from doing something is the opportunity to do it, well, then you're just as guilty as if you've already done it. Right? And the idea is that you're looking after her with lust. That is, you're pursuing her. You're looking for an opportunity. Again, that looking at her doesn't just mean that you see her and you think, man, she's a nice looking woman. That's not what that means. It means you're going after. You're pursuing her. And in your pursuit of her, with lustful intentions, it doesn't matter whether the opportunity actually presents itself to do what you want to do as far as your heart goes, because you've got a heart problem already. Now, when it comes to cause for divorce, then no, just that committing adultery in your heart, which again, a person that is looking for an opportunity to have an affair, maybe even going so far as to make hotel reservations and all this, but then for whatever reason it doesn't happen, he hasn't actually committed adultery. And so the grounds for divorce is not there. But when it comes to his own heart and his relation to God, he's guilty. His heart is not right with God. He's not loving the Lord his God with all of his heart, soul, and mind. And loving his neighbor as himself, because he's trying to have an affair on his wife. And so his heart is not right with God. His heart is not right with his wife. And so, yes, he is guilty of sin, but he hasn't committed the actual act. And so it's not the same thing, right? Let's see. Is lusting adultery, as Jesus said? It's the key there is in his heart. It's in his heart. Is anger murder, as Jesus said? It's a person's heart problem. If I'm angry at a brother without a cause, I haven't actually killed them. They're not actually murdered. They might not even know how bad I hate them, right? If I'm saying, if that's my mentality, they might not even know what my thinking is toward them. But as far as my heart with God, I have a problem. I have a problem, right? And so, again, the point that Jesus is making there, and the principle that he's teaching there, is that my intentions matter, right? If my intent is to have an affair, well then I'm in trouble. I got a problem. If my intent is to be malicious to somebody, that's what, hating them, that anger, that's what that is, being malicious towards somebody. Then even if I don't find opportunity to express that the way that I would really, like to get a hold of that person, but I never actually do that, well, that doesn't change the fact that I got a problem in my heart. That's the principle that Jesus is teaching there. So again, like I said, it's just not the same thing as the actual act, the actually committing the act. It's not the same thing. It may result in the same spiritual condition. It may cause me to be lost, and that's part of the point, that I'm just as lost because that's the condition of my heart as I would be if I actually committed the act. But without the actual commission of the act, I haven't committed fornication, or I haven't committed murder. Without the actual commission of the act, it's my heart that is the problem, right? Okay. Dustin Nash, good to see you watching this evening. Praise be to God. I would like to hear you speak about Daniel 12, 11 and 12. Explain the 45 days and the extra blessing. Thanks. Okay, let me look at Daniel chapter 12 verses. That's not, one of my memory verses that I have off the top of my head, so I have to look at it. Daniel chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. Now I know in Daniel chapter 12, I need to back up a little more. I know in Daniel chapter 12, he's prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And let's see, verses 11 and 12. Daniel chapter 12, verses 11 and 12 says, and from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. That's something that, I don't really want to comment too much on it just off the top of my head, because I do need to go look at it and do a little digging into it. But what I can say just off the top of my head is that abomination of desolation, Jesus did talk about that, and that was when the Romans came in, and like I said, and here he's prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem, and in prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem, he talks about the abomination of desolation. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, verse 21, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, get out of the city, right? Because that was one of the signs of the destruction of Jerusalem that Jesus talked about. That happened in AD 70 when Titus marched the armies of Rome into Jerusalem to destroy the city. And the destruction of Jerusalem was brutal. The temple was torn down. That's what Jesus said, not one stone to be left upon another. He predicted it. And it happened in AD 70. And so that's what that has to deal with. Now the times that are involved there, different people have made different calculations of those times. Just off the top of my head, I would say it's talking about the new covenant of Christ, the Christian dispensation, right? That came after the law of Moses. But like I said, I don't want to say too much about it without getting into it. That's something I try to be careful about. If I'm not sure what something is, then I'm not afraid to tell you, well, I'm not sure. I will go look at it and get clear on it, because I can. You can. Anybody can. It is, the Bible is given for us to understand and to know, but it's a big book. There's a lot in it, and I don't know anybody that can just remember everything in it off the top of their head. So I don't want to speak just off the top of my head and say something that then I'll have to come back and correct later. But I do know, like I said, the abomination of desolation is in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 21. Jesus said that would be one of the signs to look for the destruction of Jerusalem. And so I do know that is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And it has the times and everything that's involved there. It has something to do with the destruction of Jerusalem and the church at that time. All right? Okay. Let me go on. Sebastian, it doesn't say pursuing her with bad intentions. It says looking at her with lust, and if you do, you are committing adultery. Okay, so if I'm getting what you're saying, your point, that if you look at someone and your thought when you look at that person is that I don't know. I'm trying to think of a way to put it without being crude. I'd like to get with her, or a girl looking at a man, I'd like to get with him. Something like that. But there's no. Well, I mean, that would be a problem too, because you shouldn't be thinking about people like that. But it's not something that you act on. It's not. I mean, you look at someone and you find that person attractive. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being attracted to somebody, right? There's no intention to act on anything. There's no intention to do anything immoral, or you find a person attractive. But it's like the word hear. When the Bible says that you have to hear the Word of God, right? Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. We understand that hearing there doesn't just mean the audible acknowledgement of some, or even just reading it on the page. We understand that's not what it means. Hearing means, just like what you referred to there, looking. Hearing means that we receive it to act on it, right? Like in Acts 2:41, those who gladly received His word. That is, they heard it. They heard it with the intent of acting on it, right? That's what it means when it says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. Right? A lot of people hear the Word of God that don't have anything close to faith. Well, what's the difference? The difference is my reception of it. Right? I'm hearing it with the intention of acting on it. Well, it's the same thing with that word look, right? He's looking at her with an intention to act on what he's thinking. And so that's the it's not just simply looking at someone. That would make it, really hard to function in daily life. There was a sect of Pharisees that were called bleeding Pharisees, because they did take that, they did take a position that was that literal, that you're not even supposed to look at the opposite sex. And they were called bleeding Pharisees because they would not look at a woman. They'd close their eyes or bow their head or, turn away, and they'd walk into stuff, and they had cuts and bangs and stuff where they would walk into stuff and get beat up. And they were called bleeding Pharisees. Well, that's not what Jesus is talking about there. That would be really hard to maintain, I think. And I don't want that to sound bad, like, we're walking around, drooling over people. That's obviously not right. But, when Jesus says looking at her, he's talking about pursuing her, going after her, right? And so if the only thing that prevents you, and that's, that same principle would apply to any sin. If I go out from here and, man, I just really want to pull on a mean drunk, and I go out of here with just my heart set to go and go to the bar and throw down, but for whatever reason, I don't go. Well, that doesn't change the fact that I really want to. That if I had the opportunity to do it, I sure would. Right? That means I have a heart problem, and that's what Jesus is talking about. It's not just abstaining from certain actions. It's your heart. What's the condition of your heart? If the only thing preventing you from engaging in these, whatever actions we're talking about, is the opportunity to engage in those actions, well then, then you got a problem. If the only thing that stops me from, if the only thing that stops me from being a drunk is that I'm around people all the time that, I don't want to drink in front of them, but every chance I get to be alone, to be away where they can't see me, man, I'm chugging that bottle, well then, my heart is not right. And that's going to condemn me, because I really want to engage in that sin. And the only thing preventing me from doing that is the opportunity to do it. And that's the point. Again, that's the point Jesus is making there. All right. Is the heart actually your head? There's a 12-inch journey in the human body. No, I point to my head because I make a point to say, that this is not the biblical heart. This is the biblical heart, meaning the way that I think, my mentality, my state of mind, disposition, all those things. So I'm not actually pointing here to say that my heart is my physical brain. I'm pointing here because that's typically what we associate with the mind, right? We say, our mind, not our blood pump, is the biblical heart, okay? So no, I don't think that that my heart is actually my head, no. Dustin Nash, amen, I respect your answer. I appreciate that, Dustin. Sebastian, so it's the behavior, not the heart desire. That's the opposite of That's the opposite of what I said. That's the opposite of what I said. No, it is your heart. It is your heart. But having a heart problem is still not the same thing of actually committing the act. It's wrong. You're still in trouble. You still got a problem. But it's not the same thing of actually committing the act. You know, if I think every day, I got it in my head, man, I wish I wasn't married. I would go and I would get with that woman. First chance I got, man, I would go and get with her. My wife is nothing compared to her. Well, if that's what I'm thinking, then I'm wrong. I got a problem, and I'm going to be lost because of it. But I haven't committed fornication on my wife, so that my wife can divorce me for fornication. She might not even know that that's what I'm thinking, because, with her, I'm just as sweet and nice as I can be. But the whole time I'm thinking, I really wish you were this other woman. And when I'm with her, I'm thinking about this other woman. That's sinful. That's really bad. But it's a heart problem. I haven't actually committed fornication against my wife so that she could divorce me. So, that's the opposite of what I said. Jesus was saying it wasn't just the behavior, but the heart as well. That's exactly right. That's what I've been talking about. That's what I've been saying the whole time. That they are the same. No, they're not the same. And he didn't say they were the same. He said in the heart. In the heart is not the same thing as in the bed. You don't see the difference there? One is in my heart, and the problem is with me. If it was the same thing, then the woman I was thinking about like that would also be guilty if it was the same thing. No. One is in my heart, the other one's in the bed, or in the backseat, or in the hotel, wherever, with an actual other person that is also guilty. So one is in my heart, and everybody else is oblivious to that. Everybody else is perfectly innocent of what's in my heart, but I'm not. I'm guilty. So, your comment is good up until the ellipsis. The ellipsis is where you go wrong. Jesus was saying it wasn't just the behavior, but the heart as well. Absolutely right. That they are the same. No, wrong. Because Jesus said, in your heart. That's not the same thing as in your arms, or, it's not the same thing as the actual action. The point is, you're just as guilty either way, because it's in your heart. But the point is not to say that it's the same thing. One is a physical activity that involves another person, and the other one is just something wrong with my heart that affects me and just me. All right? Okay. Well, the live chat is not moving anymore. Okay. Are they both sins? Yes. But one is worse than the other. I thought Jesus was making the point that sins of the heart are just as bad as sins of behavior. When it comes to my spiritual condition, that's true. We're not talking about levels of severity. We're not talking about levels of severity. Lost is lost. Sin is sin. And when it comes to the condition of my heart, that can be just as damning as the actions I'm engaged in. Didn't Jesus say that it's not what goes into a man, into a man's mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out, right? Because that's what comes out of his heart. See, that's where it originates, is in the heart. Well, if it's in my heart, but I never actually act on it, well, then I still am corrupt in my heart. And so that affects me, but it's still not the actual act. Okay? So, in some ways we're saying the same thing, but you can't equate or make them equal like I think you're trying to do. To say, because, and the reason I make such a strong point of that is because there are people that will say, well, my wife was, lusting after this other man. Jesus said, I found, things that she wrote about him. I found messages that she sent him and all this stuff. And, she was lusting after this other man, and they were carrying on like, they were headed towards something. And they'll say, see, so Jesus said that she already committed adultery with him in her heart, so I can divorce her and get remarried. No, you can't. Because she hasn't actually committed the act of adultery. She hasn't actually committed fornication. Now, is she guilty? Does she need to repent? Yeah, she does. And she needs to cut it out real quick. But she's not guilty of the actual act of fornication. She's guilty of having a heart problem. Okay? So no, you can't divorce her for that. Now, you might have some serious issues that you need some counseling, and you need to work through some stuff, and you you may need to tell somebody, you better stay away from my wife, or we're gonna have some real issues, right? There may be some difficulties involved with that, but it's not grounds for divorce because she hasn't committed fornication. So that's one of the reasons that I think we need to be, really careful with the way we talk about that, because, if somebody thinks that because, for example, they might say something like, she was emotionally cheating on me, or he was emotionally cheating on me. Well, that may be true, but if they didn't commit fornication, then that doesn't qualify under what Matthew 19:9 said, what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 9. She didn't commit fornication. He didn't commit fornication. You may have a problem, and it may look like it was headed that way, but if you cut it off before it got to that point, then yeah, they are wrong. They are not right with God or you. But it's not the same thing as the actual physical act. Okay? So it's not grounds for divorce. And somebody thinks that it is the same thing and thinks that it is grounds for divorce, and then they go and get a divorce and they get remarried. Well, now they're in an illegitimate marriage that God calls adultery. And that's really bad. That's a bad situation to be in. So that's why I think it's important that I distinguish that they're both bad, they're both problems, they'll both cause you to be lost, they're both damning, but they're not both the same thing. You can't equate them like that, saying that they're the same thing, because that can lead to some really bad extenuating problems, right? Okay. Al says, hey, Norm, guess what? I agree. Great. Al, I know that there's a lot of things that me and you would agree on, but there's no way I could ever be a Catholic. No way. Because there's so much about Catholicism that you can't show me here. And everything I talk about comes from here. Now, I may not know what, every sign and symbol of apocalyptic language means, like in Daniel, but I do know the morality that the Bible teaches. And I read a really good quote. Coincidentally, I'm studying the book of Revelation because we're starting a study of the book of Revelation this Saturday. And I was reading what one person wrote about the book of Revelation, and I thought it was a really good quote because he was making the point that just because you might not know everything about the book of Revelation, and you might look at, something, one of the symbols that are there, a vision in Revelation, and you might not be real clear on what that says. Well, that doesn't mean I don't know anything, right? So not knowing something doesn't invalidate what I do know, right? And so I know biblical morality, and I know the Christian lifestyle and how to live the Christian lifestyle. And so, everything I'm talking about comes from here. And I've said before, Al, I've said it to you, I've said it to Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Baptists, Presbyterians, Methodists, Episcopalians. I've said it to everybody I can say it to. That we're different. There's something there that separates us, that needs to be resolved. And I've said, if you can show me in this book, in here, not in some creed book or manual or catechism, or no, in here, if you can show me in here where I'm supposed to be, what you're saying I'm supposed to be, I'll be that. Because I don't have any agenda or what's the right way to put it? Loyalty or attachment, or however you want to say it. I don't have any agenda other than just to be what this book says I'm supposed to be. I want to be what this book says I'm supposed to be, because I know I've studied the evidence. I've seen the irrefutable, 100% rock solid, undeniable evidence that this is the Word of God. I know unwaveringly that this is the Word of God. And my only agenda is to be what this book says I'm supposed to be. And so if you can show me in here where I'm supposed to be what whoever is telling me I'm supposed to be, the Mormons say I'm supposed to be a Mormon, or the Jehovah's Witnesses say I'm supposed to be a Jehovah's Witness, or Catholics say I'm supposed to be a Catholic, or whatever. Well, if you can show me in here where that's what I'm supposed to be, then I'll be that, because that's my only agenda. That's all I want, is to be what this book tells me to be. Okay? So I know that, I'm sure, we certainly agree on Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the three persons of the Godhead. We certainly agree on that. We agree on the deity of Christ. We agree on the virgin birth. I know there's a lot of stuff we agree on. But it's those things that separate us that we need to resolve. Because if there's something there, and this applies to any religious organization, doesn't matter what it is. If there's something there that divides us, that means that we've got a difference of belief on something. Well, this is what God said. And so if there's a difference between us that we can't be united, even though we agree on a lot of stuff, but there are those things that divide us, that make you what you are and me what I am, well then those are the things that we need to resolve. Those are the things we need to study, to look at, and to see, okay, which one of us is in harmony with what this says, and which one of us isn't. Because if you can show me that I'm not in harmony with what this says, I'll change like that. If you can show me in here where I'm not what this says I'm supposed to be, man, you'll see the dust cloud fly up at how quick I change, because that, like I said, that's all I want. That's my only agenda, is to just be what this says I'm supposed to be. So, can you say the same thing? If we look at that, we say, okay, well, the reason we're not the same, the reason we don't have unity is because of this right here. This, and you could say whatever, infant baptism. Say whatever. Infant baptism. I can't agree with infant baptism. There's no way I can go along with infant baptism. That's something that divides us. Okay, so let's look at that and see if I need to change and accept infant baptism so that we can be united on that, or if you need to change and drop infant baptism because you see it's not in harmony with what the Bible says. So I can say 100% unequivocally, no reservations at all, that if you show me where I'm wrong, you show me where I'm not in step or in harmony with this in, whatever way, then, like I said, you can call me flip-flop if you want to, because I'll flip right over. I'll change in a heartbeat. So if I can say that, can you say the same thing? And if not, why not? Is it because you have a loyalty to an organization rather than to Christ? Is it because you have a loyalty to a doctrine rather than to Christ? Because that would be the only reason, isn't it? If the only reason you won't change when you see that something you believe isn't what the Bible teaches, well then it would have to be because your loyalty isn't to Christ, it's to whatever that thing is that you're not willing to change. Right? And so I know we agree on a lot of stuff. So we need to work on those things where we don't agree. Maybe you can help me on some things I need to change. Because I will. And maybe I can help you to change on some things where you need to change. Will you? All right. Very good. The live chat has stopped moving again. So, if there's no more discussion in the live chat, let's see, we're at 1 hour and 48 minutes. So let me see if I can stretch this out another 12 minutes to hit 2 hours. And Sebastian jumps in to give us another few minutes to make it to 2 hours. All right. I know many church men who lust after women and watch porn without any conscience of sin because they are actually sleeping with her. Okay? No, actually sleeping with... What does that mean? Oh, not. You're saying because they're not actually sleeping with her. Well, they're still... what's the way to say it? They're still taking pleasure in something that is immorality. Even though, I don't see how a person could watch pornography and say that they're not doing anything wrong because they're not actually sleeping with the person. Well, they are taking pleasure in immorality because they're taking pleasure in fornication. They're taking pleasure in prostitution. They're, all these different things involved with porn, and it's really bad. And they're taking pleasure in those things, and that is sinful. That is wrong. And it's a corruption of their, I don't know where you want me to point. It's a corruption of their heart, right? It's a corruption of their heart. It's a corruption in the way that they think, in the way that, in their mindset. And it is sinful. The difference is they're not engaging in a sinful activity with another person or committing an act against another person, like murder, like you pointed out there. They're not committing an act against another person. The person that they hate in their heart is still alive. They're not dead, but their heart is wrong, and they're just as guilty as it says, as a murderer, because their heart is wrong. So, yeah, I don't see, and if somebody tried to tell me that, if somebody tried to say, if I was talking with somebody about pornography, like I'm talking with you now, if I was talking with somebody about pornography and about, you gotta repent of that, cut it off, get away from it, eliminate the opportunity to engage in it. You got to get away from it. It's bad. It's going to cause you to be lost. It's going to cost you your soul. If I was counseling somebody on that, and they said to me, well, I'm not actually sleeping with the person, then that's how I would explain it. I understand you're not actually sleeping with the person, but you are taking pleasure in immorality. You are taking pleasure, and you're you have that work of the flesh that is lust. You are lusting and being lustful, and so that is a sin. So you are still committing a sin even though you're not committing fornication with the person. So, let's see, not actually sleeping her. Would they go to hell if they only lust? Yes, lust, we can look at the works of the flesh. It says it, pretty clear in Galatians chapter 5. The works of the flesh are these, verse 19. Let's see. Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication. See, those are two different things. Adultery is having sexual relations with someone that is not your spouse. A married person having sexual relations with someone who is not their spouse. That's adultery. Fornication is also a sexual sin, but it's different because fornication is any sexual activity outside of marriage. See, fornication is the broader sexual sin, right? Homosexuality homosexual activity is fornication. Adultery is fornication, right? Fornication is any sexual activity outside of marriage, where adultery is more specific. It's a married person having sexual relations with someone not their spouse, okay? So that's the difference between adultery and fornication. So he says, adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like. Well, lust is that it's uncleanness. It would involve that sexual lust. That's really what would be better translated sexual immorality, because that's what uncleanness means. That's the Greek word there. That's what it's referring to is sexual immorality. And then that would be the lust there in the works of the flesh, the uncleanness and the lewdness. Those are things that. So yes, lusting is a sin. Yes, but it's not the same thing as adultery. And again, Jesus said in the heart, right? He's already committed adultery with her in his heart because of that lust. So that's not the same thing as the actual physical act. And it's certainly not grounds for divorce. And again, that's what I said. That's why I make that point. Let's see. Would they go to hell if they only lust? Yes. If it is a condition of their heart that causes them to not have the right heart with God, then yes. Let's see. 19 Cocoliso says, Norm, my mission is to spread the gospel and to evangelize everyone I come into contact with. That's why I'm still here. If I help someone see the truth, I did the Lord's work. Okay. Richard, thanks for the study tonight, Norm and all. Thanks for being here, Richard. Appreciate you. Sebastian, appreciate you being here. 19 Cocoliso says good night. And we are at 1 hour and 55 minutes, and I guess that's going to be as close to 2 hours as I get, because when people start saying good night, I think it's time to say good night. So, until next week, good night.